Welcome to my humble little office. That came out well. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on December 24th, 2021 at approximately 7:10 a.m. PST. Things are definitely taking an interesting turn. The the way I'm finding out, yesterday I was doing a little poking around, and of course, I get my information not by scanning the net, but by information passed on to me from other people that I happen to know. Now, it turns out that there are conflicts all the way from the ground to the top. A pair, and I'm referring to this whole COVID mess. Okay. Next year, I'm going to be dealing with as little as I can with the whole thing. I've avoided it for the most part. But I find it fascinating that one set of court officials the people that humans put at the top of the totem pole as far as legal things go, where one set can go, no, this is completely bogus, and the whole thing with COVID is overstated. I mean, I was shown a document the other day, and of course, documents themselves, I'm talking on the internet. Okay, somebody sent it to me. And I question everything that I get told anyway. But the reality of it is, I was shown a document that stated that a Supreme Court, and I honestly don't recall if it was Canada's or the US's, but the one Supreme Court turns around and says COVID is the vaccine is doing nothing to stop the spread of the virus or to protect you against it. Okay. And then another court turns around and flips the whole things over and says it's working. So who do you believe? Well, I believe me. Okay. And that's just where that goes. That's why I don't go and talk to doctors much. I do know that aside from, as I've mentioned before, aside from a pretty severe heart attack and annoying stroke that I'm finding out I'm still having troubles with, primarily in fine motor control. Okay, but I do know, aside from that, and two tooth infections, I haven't been ill in 25 years. Okay, have I had heartburn? Have I had, dizziness? Absolutely. But have I had the common cold or the common flu? No, not in 25 years. I'm not talking about it being not reported. I've never had a vaccine for the flu. And people look at me and go, well, at your age, you should be getting one. I'm like, why? Okay. But when people cannot agree on any of it, there is so much fear running around. And this time of year is especially important for people to really work together. Now, if we can stop the war for even a day, if we can stop World War One for even one day, okay, on the front lines, is it not feasible to consider that we can stop this whole garbage about fighting with each other over who started what? At this point, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like trying to figure out who's responsible for the Titanic ending up hitting the iceberg. Okay, the person responsible or the country responsible doesn't matter. Okay, in my opinion, what difference does it make who started it? The fact of the matter is, we have to deal with it. Now, from my perspective, it's pretty simple. Follow the three karmic laws. Be true to yourself first. Do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Energy out, energy in. You follow those three laws, okay, and you'll find things work out a whole lot better than they are right now. Is this a failsafe that means everything goes well and we all get to live happy lives? Absolutely not. Pretty much for the entirety of human civilization, mankind has built their entire belief structure, their entire outlook on life seems to be based on fear. Okay. I mean, and we can start way back. I mean, it's understandable if you now this is where it gets to be conflicted. So what I'm about to tell you, if you agree with it, absolutely go with it. If you don't take it on. Okay, we are talking about the belief structure I grew up with and the memories I have. Now, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of wrenches into this before I get started. Number one, before I was 10, I was clinically dead, as in a doctor had to restart my heart 4 times before I was 10. Afterwards, it's 4 to 6 times where my heart just spontaneously restarted itself. Okay. Now, that said, I've been dealing with the spirit world, with the metaphysical world, with ghosts, that sort of thing, and aliens since day one. That's also where I learned how to ask for travel. I wasn't happy about being here to start with. I've been role playing, as in playing Dungeons and Dragons and various other role playing games like that, since I was 13. My abilities, I missed one here. My abilities, as far as understanding people and understanding the way they were operating, became public knowledge when I was 10. Started gaming when I was 13. By the time I was 23, I was professionally working in the psychic consulting field, helping people with personal problems, business problems, alien interaction, abductions, that sort of thing, the MyLab situation, all of this. Now, I dealt with the MyLabs military laboratories when I was only 2 years old is where it started. At least the best. I shouldn't say that's where it started, but that's where it physically started because my memories create all kinds of complications. But here's the thing. Okay, regardless of what you believe, we go back to the caveman. Cavemen started having an interesting problem. They didn't understand a thing. At that point, we were afraid of the thunderclaps. Okay, net result, because we couldn't see it, we couldn't understand what we were looking at. We would huddle by the fire, listening to the thunder god scream his rage at us. So we'd cower in the caves, and we'd hide, huddle up close to each other and against the fire, because the light kept the animals away, meaning light brought us safety. We couldn't see well at night anyway, but we did understand that if we stayed close together as a family, as a clan, we could survive it. Okay, there was safety in numbers. Now that's great. Then we moved out of the caves into the plains and what have you. And here's the thing: the way people are today, I still think the way we got out of the caves was by accident and couldn't find our way back in. So made the best of what we had. But then civilization started to evolve. Okay, because you get outside, you start dealing with an interesting situation. Okay, you start dealing with this neat little situation of, we started into harvesting, into growing our own food. Okay, into the agricultural side. And of course, we were still looking to understand the unknown. We couldn't understand where all this water was coming from, the stuff that was falling on us. So we assumed that the gods were correct, because the gods were just an idea that was way beyond our understanding. Somebody somewhere along the line, and no, it wasn't my fault, at least not to the best of my knowledge, somebody somewhere along the line started capitalizing, and I do mean that quite literally. They claimed a direct connection with the gods. And net result, people congregated because whoever these people were that started this whole process, they came to the understanding, if I lay claim to understanding the gods, I gain better seating in the social circle. And thus we have the birth of religion. Oddly enough, the birth of religion as you know it today. We did not, when we were afraid of the thunder god, when we were afraid of the rain god, this was not a question of worshiping him. This was a question of hiding from him, letting him have his way, and we'd carry on with life. Then somebody decided to claim an attachment to them, an understanding of them. And in our naivety, we turn to these spiritual guides, to these spiritual leaders that claimed to know what they were doing. And they did have a certain amount of scientific understanding, rudimentary though it was. Okay. And they learned how, and what happened was they learned how to time things. So they figured out that, a storm will only last for so long. So what they did, quite literally, was they went, okay, I know the storm's going to end in approximately so long. So we'll get people dancing around the fire, making a bunch of noise, right? And we will chalk that up. That will be the signal. We're doing that, and they timed it so nicely that the ceremony went on. And by the end of the ceremony, the rain had stopped. Okay, net result, see, I told you this would appease the gods. And then they would lay claim and say, now, in order to do this, we've got to have a sacrifice of all this food stuff, all this drink stuff, all the wealth that you've accumulated. Okay, and at that time, wealth boiled down to a neatly carved trinket. Okay, but bring your wealth to us, to me, and I will make certain, I will get that move to somebody else. I will get that move to where the gods lie. So what you ended up with was this whole idea of you're going to give me this stuff so I can appease the god to make the god happy. Now, in case you hadn't noticed, thunder and lightning still happen. Rain still happens. Okay, so time goes on, and now we've got this neat little problem of we're starting to relax a little in the way of life happens, people die. But these spiritual guides went, well, in order to make sure that after you're dead, you can continue. And who started to vocalize the concept of the soul? I don't know. I know I've known about the soul for as long as I can recall, and trust me, that's a long time. Or don't trust me, I don't care. Okay, but now all of a sudden the soul comes into play. Okay, and people started working with the idea of the soul. And, you're going to die, you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to this terrible place where everything bad is going to happen. Now, the whole concept of the hell being on fire had really to do with the fact that we knew for an absolute certainty already, we could still remember that fire kept the bad things away. So the fire had to be worse than the bad things. So what did the religious leaders do? They went, oh, well, if you don't do what we tell you, you'll end up burning in the fire forever. Okay, that's where you'll end up. Well, we were already afraid of everything else. And, in all fairness, fear of the wild animals and what have you made practical sense. Because way too many of us got killed by things that, that if we'd have been afraid of, we'd have kept our distance from. Now, don't get me wrong. Well, we'll get to the don't get me wrong later. Okay, so they came up and said, okay, you give me your wealth, and I will pass on word that you're giving me your wealth, and therefore the gods who I've got solid contact with will leave you alone, and you'll be able to go to the light. You'll be able to stay in the warmth, in the peaceful times, in the green grasses. You'll be able to sit, on those fluffy things up there. That's where you're going to end up. Sitting up away from the fire, really comfortable, really happy. You'll be able to sing and chant just like you do now to protect yourself. Okay, and it carried on in this fashion. In today's world, okay, you die, you go to hell. You're going to burn for all eternity. Okay, in whatever religion it is, if you don't do what we tell you, number one, some religions go, you're going to burn in hell. Other religions go, if you don't do exactly what we tell you, we're going to cut you off from your family, from that family unit. that group of people that have made you feel secure. We're going to throw you out in the cold. We're going to keep you away from it. Okay, and it's that fear of loss that drives most of you. Okay, and then of course, if you don't believe in gods, that's okay. And this is the way they went. You don't believe in gods, that's okay. We'll just bury you in the ground. Nobody will come and collect you. Right. If you don't believe, you're going to hell anyway. Right. But we won't bother with burying you anywhere. We'll just get rid of you. The body won't matter. Well, here's the funny thing. Okay. People, the reason for burying our elderly when they passed, or the sick when they passed, was not a religious thing. It was a practical thing. Okay. And the practicality was this: if you bury the body, the wild animals won't actually come around the camp. So you bury it outside of the camp perimeter, away from the light, away from the fire, away from you. Bury them, but that was a protection thing for self. Okay. Religion turned that into a massive ceremony. Now, don't get me wrong. Okay. I am a firm believer that God exists for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is my own experiences. But here's the thing. I've died, like I said, multiple times. And when you take a look at it, okay, does having that neat little place where you sit on, fluffy, comfortable little seats, does it exist? Certainly. The music up there is great. Here we call it elevator music. But personally, I'm kind of fond of harp music, so that works well. Okay. And of course, you got to remember, at the time, the reason that everybody said, harps and lutes and what have you was because that was the only instruments they had. Okay, they were very calming, very relaxing. Even the flute and the panpipe were all very relaxing. And then you have the drums. Okay, well, the drums are very hard on the hearing. Okay, and that's where, and of course, they were always used, the drums were used to call people in from the fields because dinner was ready. And they carried much further. So they were a lot more, not only did they call people in, but they chased away the more skittish of the wild animals as well. So, do I believe that God exists? Yes. You die. Is there a heaven or a hell or a coffin for you to go and lay in? Absolutely. Okay. Been there, done that. It's a riot over there. But the thing you got to realize is you're not trapped. Okay. Now, I know this is going to upset some of you. And, I'd apologize if it actually made a lot of difference to me. The reality of it is, I know it's going to upset people because I am challenging the very foundation of what you've been taught. The funny part about it is, I am probably more of a believer in God, in Jesus, than you are. And quite frankly, whether you call him God, Allah, the source, the universe, Mother Nature, Yitzhak, Gaia, I don't care. Okay, call it what you will. That supreme being is known by many names on many different worlds. Okay, in many different cultures. But the one thing you got to remember, even way back when we were dealing with the beginnings of it all, okay, we did come to the brilliant conclusion that somehow along the way, because we knew that our fear, we never bowed down to start with. When you think back about it, yes, we cowered together, we huddled together around the fire, partially for warmth, partially for protection. Okay, but we never bowed down and prayed to a specific God until a spiritual leader come in and said, I've got a direct connection. And this is how you can also make a connection. But you got to go to me to get that connection. And that's where it went sideways. Okay. The reality is every one of you has that same connection. You're all equal. Okay. And as I point out in this wood sign back here, I am worth it. That applies to you as well. Put that on your fridge. Not necessarily wood. Write it on paper. Works just as well. I've got one of my fridges laminated on cardstock. You know, but the reality is every single one of you has the capacity to make connection with with the higher powers. Every one of you does. And this is something that you were told, but it became far easier to look to one individual and say, there's the person that's got the connection. Okay. If something goes wrong, I can blame who they're connected to, and I can defer the damage and the guilt to somebody else. Doesn't work that way. In case you hadn't noticed, even if you believe, like I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ. In all fairness, I believe in Yeshua because Jesus, and do your own homework on this. My understanding is that the letter J did not even come into existence until the late 17th century. So we're talking almost 1800 years after Yeshua passed away that they started calling him Jesus. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into the history and how all that came back. But the reality is, okay, if you follow that line of thinking, and he died for your sins, okay, this does not mean that you're allowed to go out and treat people like garbage anymore. If you recall the way he lived his life, okay, he went around telling people the same thing. Be nice to each other. If you desire to understand the way that the higher energies work, get along and talk to each other. Okay, the religions have taken this and gone, if you don't believe exactly in what I say, then we're going to cut you off from all of the people that you know. Okay, net result, the religious foundation that society has been building around is coming apart at the seams. Okay, now I know of one situation in particular that I was told, and again, this is what I was told. Okay, and that is way back there was a famine, and there's been a lot of those over the years. But the government at the time was trying to stop people from killing off certain animals. Okay, frankly, it was cattle livestock. And no, I'm not going to go into which religion it was, but the government was having major problems dealing with stopping people from killing the animals because there was a famine going on. So people were killing the cattle. And the government kept saying you can't because if you kill the cattle, you're out of cheese, you're out of milk. Okay, and then this famine gets worse. Well, they tried arresting people, they tried fining them, they tried taking their freedom away and stopping them from having cattle and then rationing out food that way. None of it worked. So the government turned to the church at the time, to that church, and they said, okay, look, we've got a problem. We need this to stop, or we can't stop the famine. We've got to stop this stupidity somehow. Is there anything you can do? And this is where the religious community got together and did exactly what was necessary. They got together, they hemmed and hawed for a little while, and they come out on their holy day. And don't ask how that came about. I don't know. Picked a day of the week. Okay. They came out on their holy day and went, the cow is sacred. Leave the cow alone. Net result, people stopped killing the cow because they were following the religious teachings. And in this case, that was spiritual guidance at its finest. Do this in order to survive. Okay. Came out and said so. Cow, all of a sudden, they stopped killing them. Right. Now, the reality is it killed the famine off. But that was when the government and the church actually worked together. Now, people have this brilliant idea, keep the church and the government separate. Well, I'll tell you, that one saved that particular society's life. Okay. If the government and the religious people actually work together, you can get things back on track. This whole thing with COVID. I mean, yes, social distancing works like a charm. The reality is if you've got a cold and you don't go near people, And rest assured, COVID is a whole lot worse than a cold. But it is still an infection. And if you've got an communicable infection and you stay away from people, you won't get the infection because it won't get to you unless it goes airborne. At which point you've got another problem, which, by the way, it's already done that. They just haven't told you. This is why the vaccines aren't working for most people. I mean, sure, they cut down on the immediate, but then I'm a firm believer in this one as well. If you've got a cold, and from what I gather, the scientific community came up with this themselves. If you catch a common cold, it'll take about 2 weeks to run its cycle. With the runny nose, the dry throat, all of this. If you take the medication to deal with the symptoms, you'll still be infected for about the 2 weeks, but it won't be as miserable. And I will tell you, from when I had a cold before, having a cold and suffering with the runny nose is annoying. So the medication to dry up the runny nose, absolutely a great idea. Okay. Now, like I said, I haven't had a cold in a long time, and I'm just going to keep it that way. But when you look at that, okay, certain things make sense, but you've got to take responsibility for your actions. You're the only one that can be successful for you. Okay. Now, working together, and this is the one primary reason why I came back to this planet at all, for this lifetime, was to spread this word that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring this to a close. I got a number of things I have to deal with today. And of course, for those of you that do celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you. For those of you that celebrate something else, if Happy Hanukkah works for you, great. If it's just simply season's greetings or happy holidays, take it whichever way you will. For me, it's literally a question of Merry Christmas. Whether you believe in Christ, whether you believe in Santa is not the important factor. Whether you believe in family is kind of important. Okay. Celebrate as you will, but do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Okay. Now, I will be back again, hopefully tomorrow. See what I can do about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be Christmas. It's going to be hectic. But I will likely be back. If not, I will see you after that. But until next we meet, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.